Pattern 9. Repetition of a key term. The sentence form starts with the subject and then a verb and added with a key term. This is called as the main clause. After the main clause, there is a long dash or a comma, and then the modifying phrase, which is the repeated key term. Pattern 9 is a pattern where you repeat a keyword in a modifying phrase after the main clause. She suddenly felt filled with joy, long dash, a joy she could not explain, but that she gladly embraced. This is the correct use of pattern 9 with a long dash. We all have problems where we can find a solution that works, a solution that is equitable. This is the correct use of pattern 9 with a comma after the main clause. Before I explain further on, let's go over some keywords that might help your understanding. First, let's define key term. Key term is an important word that usually comes out at the end of the clause. Secondly, you could vary this pattern by using a long dash instead of a comma. A long dash suggests a longer break than a comma does in a sentence. The third one is the comma splice. Comma splice is a wrong use of a comma in a sentence. If you use this pattern incorrectly, you might make a comma splice in a sentence. The last word is repetition. Repetition is a restatement of a term or a phrase multiple or single times in a sentence. This means that you can repeat the key term several times. You use pattern 9 when you want to emphasize a phrase in a sentence. When using this pattern, you can repeat the phrase or key term exactly, or you could also change its form. For example, brute can be brutal, breath can be breathing, battle can be battling as well. This might help the flow of the sentence, but there are some rules in using this pattern. Rule number 1. This is an example of a bad sentence. He was a good father, providing good home for his good children. This is an overworked word. It's not worth repeating. When using this pattern, you have to make sure that the word is worth repeating. An overworked word can make the sentence uninteresting and weird. The second rule is to make sure that the attached phrase where the repetition occurs, which is added to the main phrase, is not a complete sentence. If it is a complete sentence, it will be a comma splice. The example of a wrong sentence can be, he was a cruel brute of a man. He was brutal to his family and even more brutal to his friends. As you can see, the wrong sentence, the modified phrase, is a complete sentence. To make this sentence correct, here is the example. He was a cruel brute of a man, brutal to his family and even more brutal to his friends. The modifying phrase can never be a complete sentence. The third rule is to make sure that the repeating word is a phrase, not a clause. So you should not have a subject or a verb with the repeating word. If there is one, it is a comma splice. For example, a wrong example is, he was part of the older generation. His generation was born before the Depression. This would just be better with a semicolon. The right sentence would be, he was part of the older generation, a generation born before the Depression. The last rule is to do not use a period or a semicolon where a comma should be, since then it will create a fragment out of the modifier containing the repeating word. As mentioned above, you could use a comma or a dash, but never a period or a semicolon in this pattern. For example, the sentence is wrong because there is a fragment error. He praises the beauty of his love, a love that is unfortunately hopeless because it is not mutual. After a period, there has to be a complete sentence, but a love that is unfortunately hopeless because it's not mutual is not a complete sentence. So it becomes a fragment error. For this sentence to be right, it has to be, he praises the beauty of his love, a love unfortunately hopeless because it is not mutual.